program. Let's say hello to James Vasina.
Hi, François.
It's time for sports. The NBA is in Paris.
It's in Paris. It's not every day that happens, but it's set to be a pretty big game as the Chicago Bulls take on the Detroit Pistons. An Eastern Conference clash in the east of the City of Lights. And who better to preview and talk about the state of the NBA than Lindsay Krasnoff over here. Lindsay, you've flown in pretty much at the same time as the sides have. On paper, it's maybe not the most mouth-watering of games if we look at the state of the league right now. But this is a dream come true for French fans. Mm-hmm. And as the years go by, it's a dream that's becoming true more and more often, isn't it?
Yes, very much so. The NBA this is now its second regular season game here in Paris, the first one being in January 2020. And it's with great fanfare that they've returned for 2023, kind of perhaps bookmarking the worst part of the pandemics. But certainly, and as we've seen some of the news develop today, they're hoping to return again next year, hopefully depending upon what teams are willing and able to join, but certainly building a stronger relationship with France.
So building a stronger relationship with France, with a league game that's taking place today, does this mean that the market for the NBA in France has this confirmed that it's conquered France in a way?
Well, I don't know if you could quite say conquered France, but certainly France is one of the largest markets, European markets for the NBA, particularly when you keep in mind that France has supplied historically the largest number of non-North American players to the league all time. This season, there were, I think, 9 French players on NBA opening night rosters, and this has been a pipeline that's continuously fed the league for 25 years now. So certainly the more young men who come into the league and build their careers in different ways in and around the league, the more it helps to kind of crack open that French market.
Sure. So talking about the French players going over, you've just finished your latest book, The Basketball Empire. You're looking into those relations between the NBA, the WNBA, and France. As you mentioned there, 25 years ago, this was a completely different story. International players, and in particular French players, were somewhat of a rarity in the US league. Maybe some will remember, of course, the times here of Tony Parker. It wasn't just about him. It wasn't just him who kick-started this change, was it?
Correct. The first French player in the NBA was Tariq Abdul-Wahad in 1997. So he predated Tony Parker by a few years. The interesting thing about Tariq is that he grew up in and around the women's game. His mother was a player, and his first basketball idol was one of her teammates, an American, future Hall of Famer Denise Curry. So when you talk about French in the NBA and French in the NBA, you also have to include in some way, shape, or form the role and influence of the women's game as well, which is a little bit different than the United States. So it's kind of a neat opening story. But Tony Parker, of course, helped to really kind of crack the dam open and make it possible and prove that you can be French and play and win it all in the NBA.
Sure, it's in a way setting that example, because now we've got the names of Evan Fournier, Rudy Gobert, of course, who speak to everyone. We've got some up-and-coming young talent. One man who's going to get a lot of support tonight is Killian Hayes. Just one of the latest examples, really, of that success that French players can have over in the US.
Exactly, very much. And, so there's a lot of intergenerational stories at play that help to explain how and why France became a major pipeline into the NBA. And a lot of it is the Franco-American relationship over time, not just U.S. players coming here, such as Killian Hayes' father, but also certainly over the past 25 years, the impact of French players going to the United States, whether it's in the NBA, the WNBA, or the NCAA, and then bringing back with them how they've fine-tuned their game as a result, increasingly as a result of playing not just with American players, but other international players on those courts.
Is this what gives so much of the enthusiasm that there is around Victor Wembanyama today, and of this move and everything that's coming with him? This is, again, the product of 20, 30 years of development between the two?
It is, very much, and the French youth development system, which is very different from the U.S. one, and helps to kind of set the French example apart. And the NBA certainly is, it is used INSEP and the French pro clubs' youth academies as influences when it was constructing its elite NBA youth academies around the world. It was also looking at the Australian example as well. But that's a different type of mark or impact that you could say that France and the NBA have on each other.
So we talked about, so France, we've talked about the women's game developing as well in the other way. But today there was an announcement made between the French leagues and the NBA that they were going to try and develop basketball in Africa. Is this the next market for the NBA, basically?
Definitely. Africa is the next market for the NBA. In 2019, they launched Basketball Africa League, the first Pan-African professional sports league, in partnership with FIBA, the governing body. So that was also a historic first when you have a professional league run by a professional co-partnered with the International Governing Federation. Basketball Africa League is getting geared up for its third season, which will kick off in March 2023 in Dakar, then go to Cairo, and then ending up in Kigali at the end of May. And the NBA has invested a lot in the BAL, as we call it, and trying to use it to help to spur a larger basketball but also sports ecosystem in terms of infrastructure, in terms of the NBA-style approach to the kinds of professionalism that they bring to the medical supervision, to the team management, the little things to the big things. And so it's a really interesting example also how they are promoting women in and around basketball in Africa. Even if the BAL itself is a professional league for men, you see they have a coach Liz Mills from Australia, head coach of one of the teams from Morocco, female assistant coaches. Also, you have female referees on the court within the BAL, as well as the NBA as well. So it's a really interesting project and long-term investment.
Sure, and definitely in a way a dependence really for the NBA today. If we look at, as you mentioned, the 1 in 4 players being born and trained in overseas, meaning that now really they need to go and get that talent and bring it back to the US.
Right, and also it's 1 in 4 players born and trained overseas, and 10% of international players in the NBA are from Africa. So, I think that speaks to the NBA's longer-term investment in the continent. And my understanding is that the BAL is a way to provide opportunities to play in an NBA league without having to cross the ocean. So, bringing that there.
Okay, all right, well, without them crossing the ocean, but we're going to let you cross over Paris tonight. As we've said, the chaos on the roads is there, and there's a game starting in just about 2 hours' time. So, Lindsay, thank you very much for coming on, and enjoy the match in Bercy.